Hello, everyone. Welcome to our project presentation on semantic similarity and uncertainty quantification. This project focuses on detecting uncertainty in large language model outputs. Large language models often generate answers that sound confident, but confidence in language does not always mean the answer is correct. Sometimes, when a model is uncertain, it may produce different answers for the same question. Our project studies this behavior and proposes methods to detect it using semantic similarity. The main problem we address is called confabulation. Confabulation means that a model produces different and semantically inconsistent answers when it is uncertain about a question. For example, if we ask, which planet is seventh closest to the Sun? The correct answer is Uranus. If the model answers Uranus, planet Uranus, or the seventh planet from the Sun, these answers have the same meaning. But if the model answers Uranus, Mercury, and Neptune in different attempts, then the meanings are different. This semantic variation can indicate uncertainty or confabulation. Existing approaches commonly use natural language inference, or NLI, models such as DiBerta or Roberta. These models compare pairs of generated answers and classify the relationship between them using labels such as entailment, contradiction, or neutral. For example, answer A is compared with answer B, and answer B is also compared with answer A. The two directions are then combined to decide whether the answers are semantically similar. This approach is useful, but it has some limitations. It checks every pair of answers one by one, which can be computationally expensive. Also, NLI labels are hard labels, so they do not always capture gradual similarity between answers. From the literature and existing methods, we identified four main research gaps. The first gap is hard labels. NLI labels cannot fully capture gradual semantic similarity. Two answers may be partially similar, not simply the same or different. The second gap is symmetrization. The decision from answer A to answer B can be different from the decision from answer B to answer A. Because of this, existing methods need extra steps to combine both directions. The third gap is cluster quality. Existing clustering methods may group answers without carefully checking whether the clusters are compact and well separated. The fourth gap is stability. The robustness of the semantic entropy pipeline is not always evaluated. We need to understand whether small changes in model probabilities can significantly affect the final uncertainty score. Based on these gaps, our research question is, how can confabulation detection accuracy be improved, and how can the stability of the semantic entropy pipeline be evaluated? Our project has four main objectives. First, we aim to develop an embedding-based clustering method that improves the quality of semantic grouping and improves confabulation. Detection accuracy. Second, we evaluate the stability of the semantic entropy pipeline. Third, we improve the Kernel Language Entropy, or KLE, approach by incorporating embeddings. Fourth, we benchmark our proposed methods against baseline approaches using question-answering datasets and standard evaluation metrics. Our proposed solution addresses the main weaknesses of existing methods. For strict clustering with DiBerta, we propose embedding-based clustering. Instead of depending only on hard NLI labels, we generate embeddings for answers and cluster them using semantic distances. This allows us to capture similarity in a more gradual and meaningful way. For the lack of stability analysis, we add controlled noise to logits and observe how the semantic entropy value changes before and after adding noise. For the KLE approach, we use embedding-based RBF similarity for graph construction. This avoids extra symmetrization and reduces information loss. Before explaining the method, we need to understand three key definitions. The first is token probability. This is the probability assigned by the model to the next token. For example, if the prompt is, "The capital of Australia is," the model may assign a high probability to Canberra and lower probabilities to other tokens. The second is sequence probability. Since a full answer contains multiple tokens, we calculate a probability score for the whole response. We use length normalization so that longer answers are not unfairly penalized. The third is cluster probability. When multiple answers have the same meaning, they are grouped into one semantic cluster. The cluster probability is the total probability mass of all answers in that cluster. Now we can explain semantic entropy. Semantic entropy measures how much generated answers differ in meaning. It does not only look at different wordings. Instead, it groups semantically equivalent answers together and measures uncertainty across meaning groups. The pipeline works as follows. First, the language model generates multiple answers for the same question. Then, we obtain logits and compute token probabilities. After that, we compute sequence probabilities for each answer. Next, semantically similar answers are grouped into clusters. Then, we aggregate the probability of each cluster. Finally, we compute semantic entropy. If most answers belong to one semantic cluster, uncertainty is low. If answers are spread across multiple semantic clusters, uncertainty is high. This can indicate possible confabulation. To evaluate stability, we use a noise perturbation methodology. The process begins with a question from a question-answering dataset. The model generates multiple answers. Then, we obtain the logits, which are the raw scores before probabilities are calculated. We add random noise to these logits and then recompute token probabilities, sequence probabilities, clusters, cluster probabilities, and semantic entropy. We repeat this process multiple times for the same question. This allows us to collect a distribution of semantic entropy values and analyze how much the score changes due to noise. The results show that semantic entropy variation increases when the noise standard deviation increases. In simple terms, stronger noise causes greater change in the final semantic entropy value. However, changing the noise mean does not significantly affect the results. This means the pipeline is more sensitive to the spread of the noise than to the average value of the noise. So, higher standard deviation leads to greater instability in semantic entropy. This helps us understand how robust the uncertainty estimation pipeline is. After that, we perform fluctuation analysis. The goal is to compare the original semantic entropy value with the fluctuation caused by noise. Since these values can have different scales, we normalize them using percentile-based scaling. Then we calculate importance weights to identify whether a region is fluctuation-dominant, balanced, or entropy-dominant. In the fluctuation-dominant region, noise has a stronger effect. In the balanced region, both entropy and fluctuation contribute similarly. In the entropy-dominant region, the original semantic entropy is more important than the fluctuation. This analysis helps us identify where the pipeline is stable and where it is more sensitive. Next, we introduce our embedding-based clustering method. The input is a question and multiple generated answers. First, we generate embeddings for each answer. An embedding is a vector representation that captures the meaning of a text. If all embeddings are nearly identical, then all responses are assigned to one cluster. This means the model gave answers with the same meaning. If the embeddings are not identical, we apply clustering. We use k-medoids clustering for different values of k. Then we evaluate cluster quality using compactness and the Davies-Bouldan index. The optimal number of clusters is selected using cluster quality and the elbow criterion. Finally, the method returns cluster labels for the generated answers. This improves semantic grouping because it considers the actual distance between answer meanings. For evaluation, we use a comparative benchmarking framework. The evaluation metrics include AUROC and AUARC. AUROC measures how well an uncertainty score separates correct and incorrect answers. AUARC measures how useful the uncertainty score is when ranking or filtering model responses. We evaluate using several question-answering datasets, including Trivia QA, SQuad, BioASQ, and NQOpen. We also compare across different language models such as Mistral, Gemma, Falcon, and Llama-based models. The baselines include semantic entropy, p-true, embedding regression, naive entropy, and KLE-based methods. The experimental results show that the embedding-based semantic entropy method performs strongly against several baselines. The heat maps show win rates for AUROC and AUARC. Higher values mean that the method wins more often in pairwise comparisons. These results support our main idea. better semantic grouping can improve confabulation detection and uncertainty quantification. We also study Kernel Language Entropy, or KLE. KLE represents generated responses using a graph-based structure and calculates uncertainty from that graph. However, traditional graph construction has limitations. NLI models are mainly trained for coarse labels such as entailment, contradiction, and neutral. They also require pairwise comparisons between responses, which increases computational cost. Another issue is symmetry. Logical entailment is asymmetric, so additional symmetrization is required. So, because of the limitations of the NLI-based approach, we replaced the NLI model with an embedding-based approach for kernel language entropy. In this embedding-based KLE pipeline, we first take the question and context from the dataset. For each dataset, we sample questions and generate multiple responses from the language model. In our setup, the model generates 10 high-temperature responses so that we can observe different possible answers. After generating the responses, we first do response preprocessing. Then, each response is encoded using SPERT. SPERT converts each text response into an embedding vector, which represents the semantic meaning of the response. After that, we construct an RBF graph using the embedding vectors. The RBF kernel gives a continuous similarity value between each pair of responses. This is better than using only hard NLI labels because it can capture gradual semantic similarity. Then, from this graph, we compute the graph Laplacian. After that, we calculate the heat kernel and apply kernel normalization. Finally, we use the normalized kernel to compute von Neumann entropy. So, the overall idea is to replace the existing NLI-based graph construction with an embedding-based graph construction. This avoids manual symmetrization, reduces information loss, and gives a smoother similarity representation between generated responses. Now, let us look at the overall result summary. This slide summarizes the main findings across all experiments. Overall, the experiments were conducted across different language models and question-answering datasets. The goal was to compare our embedding-based approach with existing confabulation detection mechanisms. From the summary, we can see that embedding-based semantic entropy gives the strongest overall performance. It outperforms the baselines in 13 out of 16 experiments for AUROC and 11 out of 16 experiments for AUARC. This means that embedding-based semantic entropy was more effective in distinguishing between correct and incorrect responses in most cases, and it was also useful when ranking model outputs based on uncertainty. The summary also shows that embedding-based KLE performs strongly. It gives the best result in 10 out of 16 AUROC experiments and 11 out of 16 AUARC experiments. This is important because embedding-based KLE replaces the earlier NLI-based graph construction with an embedding-based graph construction. As a result, it captures semantic similarity in a more gradual way, instead of depending only on hard NLI labels. So, the main takeaway from the results is that embedding-based approaches improve confabulation detection. This slide shows how our project can be split into 3 reusable Python libraries. The first library is LLM Sampler. This library is responsible for generating multiple language model answers and collecting their log probabilities. The second library is Embedding Clusterer. This library groups semantically similar answers using embeddings. It helps identify which responses have the same meaning and which responses belong to different semantic clusters. The third library is Shannon Entropy. This library calculates uncertainty from the semantic clusters. It uses the cluster probabilities to compute entropy-based uncertainty scores. By splitting the project into reusable libraries, our work becomes easier to use in future research and development. Other users can reuse these components separately or combine them to build a complete confabulation detection pipeline. We also created a web app. In this web app, the user can select the model, paste the API key, and ask a question. For example, if we ask, "What is the capital of France?" we can also select the number of responses we want. By default, the number of responses is set to 10. After that, when we click Analyze, the system generates 10 answers for the question and clusters them according to their meaning. In the output, we can see the generated clusters. In this case, all 10 answers are grouped into one cluster called Paris. Here, we can see that the semantic uncertainty score is 0, which means the model is confident about the answer. But if we ask the question, what is the capital of Sri Lanka? We can see that the answers are grouped into different clusters. Because of that, the system gives a considerable semantic uncertainty score. Likewise, we can use this web app to check whether the model's answers are semantically consistent or not. Thank you for watching.